strategic engagement teams for Amazon's energy and utility business. So that's a great panel to have. But before I bring it to the panel, just wanted to set some context, right? Global demand is expected to grow by more than 50%, and we've seen that from 2010 to 2040. That is happening, and it's primarily propelled by the growth of emerging markets. India, Middle East, and Africa is driving force behind this and expected to grow somewhere between 65% to 200% range, right? That's one side of the story. On the other side, we are also faced with significant headwinds, economic headwinds on the supply chain side. There is uncertainty, there is geopolitical challenges that we have, and there's a lot of inflation, which is persistent for few years now, right? Now, in this context, we are seeing the growth of prices both from material and labor. At the same time, there is shortage of it, right? So we're seeing pricing increase steadily 5% plus year on year. At the same time, the lead time for equipment supplies have gone from less than 6 months to more than 12 months now, right? So in this context, it has become a strategic imperative for procurement and supply chain to really look into how they drive value for their both internal organizations and businesses, right? And there are four key imperatives that we see. One is, how do supply chain professionals drive innovation and cost management? Secondly is, how do they strike strategic partnerships to manage the constrained supply chain environment? Third is, how do we leverage digital and innovation to drive the next level of cost unlock? And last but not least, how do we move from carbon at any cost to cost plus carbon, right? So in this context, I just wanted to open it up to the panel here and get their thoughts. So first up, Manish, just wanted to bring it to you. With this inflationary pressure driving up cost for suppliers and operators alike, how do you see procurement strategies and contracting models evolving to maintain profitability and stability in supply chain?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I think we have a great distinguished co-panelists, but let me share my concept, my experiences from a marginal independent E&P company. As Chit mentioned, the oil and gas supply chain sector is certainly grappling with business fallouts on account of sustained global inflation, geopolitical developments in Asia and Europe, and also increasing economic headwinds. And this spells double trouble for the oil and gas supply chain. First, clearly, we are on a cost roller coaster. The standard steel used materials have increased by more than 5 to 15%. The lease rentals have gone up for the marine spread by close to 20%. And not to lose focus on the second trouble, which has been hurting independents like us significantly, and that is in terms of the protracted supply cycles. Now, in this scenario, a three bids and a buy model from a very distressed supply cycle is not a winning model. We have seen traditionally it is a compliance-focused gatekeeping model of contracting. Now, that's something which really is not adequate in the current environment. And our experience has been that companies on both sides of the aisle have been working together to make sure that we build resilience in the supply chain. And not just that, but we also ensure profitability for each other. So what we are seeing from a distance is clearly emergence of three distinct mindset shifts. One, I would say it is from a vendorship to a partnership model, where the operators, service providers, equipment suppliers are deeply getting engaged right from the delivery to uh, right from the design to the delivery stage, or I would say the concept to commissioning and even beyond. So it's not just restricted to only a piece of the puzzle. The second shift which we are observing is that instead of having nice to have features and more relevant for players like us, we are going for something which is plug and produce use case, where we are harmonizing the design, the safety, and the performance features. And finally, I would say that it is rather than cost reduction, it is the value addition which we are looking at in terms of delivery on time and making sure that the projects start generating cash flows sooner. And I think while this is nothing new which I have mentioned, it has been there time and again. But what we are noticing is that in the current landscape, the circle is getting squared more often than not. So I think that is a very welcoming suggestion. I think we have miles to go, but a beginning has been made in some context.
Great. No, those are super, super helpful insights. Let me just then turn to Stéphane. As a CPO of Super Major and president of TPG, uh, cost continues to be top of the agenda. What's your view on managing cost, both for the OFSCs as well as for the OEMs?
Yes,
Perspective.
so good afternoon all. So in Total Energy, as you know, we are a major energy company with huge ambition in terms of transition of energy built on two pillars, so oil and gas, but also renewable energy. So we have a major investment program of about 18 billion US dollar per year investment in project. So as of today, we have never had so many projects in the company running. And as you mentioned, as CPO, the message from my president is just to manage the cost and to make sure that we are able just to transition the company and to deliver and to go to renewable energy, but not at any cost. So what does it mean managing the cost for us? It's not always the cheapest cost. It's just the best value we are looking with the suppliers. So it's timing, it's availability, it's quality, and it's cost. So for me, the main way to manage is, as I'm just responsible for the offer, is to make sure that I have a sufficient panel of suppliers, so that I continue just to invest on my supplier. And typically today, within Total Energy, we have about 100,000 suppliers. And we continue actually building the links with supplier, developing, qualifying the suppliers. So typically we have engaged in a program just to simplify the qualification process for the supplier, actually just to attract them to come to work for Total Energy. By leveraging actually the suppliers, we work on the cost. So that's one of the main aspects. The second aspect is also to work upstream with the suppliers, and the question, the message to my purchasing team is ensure you have a strong link with the suppliers, because yes, you have inflation, but if you don't invest, you have no project. If you have no project, there is no work for the suppliers, for the contractors. So the best thing is just to understand what is the cost for a supplier and how we can manage the cost upstream, how we can avoid fancy stuff, how we can go to standard, how we can standardize and go to simplify model for all of us, how we can avoid costs that are not of no use. So that are the two main reasons, the two main actions we have today within TotalEnergies.
Great, great. Just shifting angle then on the cost topic, Sid, do you have any recent example or thoughts on how digital and data-driven approach help organizations manage cost?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you an answer from a digital perspective. I've got two sets of customers. One that is the rest of the world and the other one that's Weatherford itself. And that actually is one of my biggest customers, right? And before we start commercializing technology, we like to take the opportunity to use it ourselves to validate the concept before we make it commercially available. Now, in that instance, we did a market study and found that on average across our customer base, 0.5% of our customers' market cap was tied up in unused inventory, registered or unregistered, which is a staggering number. And from an inventory management perspective, you can't fix a problem you don't measure. So now that we had a benchmark to hit against, we basically took our digital portfolio, which includes cameras, intelligent cameras with video analytics capabilities that can track inventory moving across the entire warehouse, from micro weight stations. So for heavy equipment, you can easily track them whether they are where they need to be based on the weight of the pallet that they're on, to tracking every single piece of equipment across our entire fleet as well, to make sure that we can give our customers as close as possible the retail supply chain experience that has set the standard for their expectations going forward. Obviously, completely different universe, the industrial one and the retail one. However, one continues to set the benchmark for the other, and using digital technologies like what I just mentioned is perhaps the fastest way to bridge the gap.
Great, fascinating to hear how digital could impact cost and inventory, and really looking at it from a different perspective. It's not just about third-party cost, but how do you manage your internal cost as well, right, to drive value. Mahesh, quick question for you. In many oil and gas segment, procurement options are limited to a handful of mega suppliers. How do you maintain healthy competition, inventory, and resilience against a disruption?
Yeah, I mean, no, thank you. Thanks for the question. And I think reflecting back on some of the comments I heard, what we are seeing, and again, I'll step back for 10 seconds and, set the context in terms of, so I run a vertical that's across the world, right? And we see differing experiences, different customers, etc. So one thing that is coming out very clear is that once you get past the first two layers, we are dealing with the same set of suppliers and vendors. But then the problem starts when we, as an EPC integrator, or the operators who sit above us, think that every project is unique. So I think that's stepping back from that mindset and thinking that what's the right way to ensure competitiveness, right? And I have the same discussions with our customers, and I think that's the same discussions we are now having with our suppliers, is going back to what Manish was saying, is that we need to build the supply chain by giving them clarity and trust, right? It's a partnership relationship. You can call it, there are various commercial models available to get around it. But the key is to say, okay, there is 5 years worth of work coming up, right? And these are key areas where we can work together, and how can we share the risks and the rewards and find a way through it. And then if from an EPCI player's perspective, typically in all the mega projects we have, probably 45 to 50% of the total cost is for somebody like us is external, right? We have to integrate the suppliers. So that can make or break the projects. So the key is going back and then developing a supply chain, which is number one, long-term, number two, repeatable, and number three, in terms of the right commercial models. Like, for example, what do we mean by right commercial models? I'll give you an example. Rather than having a vertical chain where someone tells us, okay, here's an EPC contract, then we go and say, here is a supply for lump sum. So the idea is, can we integrate some of them into us? And then, you could have a partnership model, or where we could have a consortium model wherein we try and take out the cost of the layers. We take out some of the financial risk associated with it. And then overall also then in a partnership model, a risk reward mechanism, which is what we're talking about, to build that. Because we've seen it over and over again. We are less and less interested in doing, 3 bids. I understand there is a compliance culture available in certain areas. We would have to do some of that. But with only a couple of suppliers, what are we talking about, right? And then you can get into a situation where we are talking about who is available to provide to you rather than who you want. So the question is, how do you build that long-term partnership? Is by developing a symbiotic relationship, I think, which is what Total was also talking about, right, Stéphane? So that's my take on it as well. And that's what we're seeing across the board.
Thanks a lot, Mahesh. Very, very insightful. Ashish, Mahesh talked about long-term partnership and supplier selection approach to be different. Could you share your views on best practices on supplier selection and long-term partnership? And also, how do you balance maintaining right balance of inventory to avoid underutilization, yet meeting operational goals for your organization?
Good evening, everyone. Uh, Firstly, thank you to the organizers for having me here with the very distinguished co-panelists. I think I'm sandwiched and I'm able to give you a perspective from both sides. One as a vendor to my clients and also as a client to my vendors. So very interesting. Amazing to see the vibrancy here. And so look, I think Manish very well covered and also Mahesh about what is the approach. And while the world has been changing significantly with the advancement of technology and AI, but sadly the the contracting process has, I think, not kept up with it. We are still in the traditional mindset in many of the clients, and that's where Seros is today a very young homegrown company. We've been in existence for about 2.5, 3 years. A short span of time, we've become India's leading integrated oil field services provider, and right from drilling to well completion and also onshore, offshore, into logistics, etc. So what we've been trying to do is while selecting our vendor partners, we have tried to take a little unconventional approach, not the three-bid system and not the, it's, if you see, this sector has usually been a big boys sort of sector, a lot of entry barriers and qualification criteria, experience requirement, etc., etc. So it's very difficult to get on board new vendor partners. So what we said is that let's look at it from three pillars by and large. So one is, of course, the first and foremost requirement we see is that that fire in him, or what we call as integrity, and that willingness to do. Second is that yes, the cost conscious mindset needs to be there. And third, what we look for is the scalability capability within that. And so at Seros, I'm proud to say we've gone out of the way to induct vendor partners who have had, like, we've really handheld them and grown them, and as long as they have the willingness to learn. So we like to look at it as that it needs to be a win-win situation. It cannot be a I win. Often there is a mindset of, just cost and cost and cost, and whoever is the lowest gets. I feel it doesn't work, and frankly, the clients also know it doesn't work, because somewhere it's not just you have to look at the total cost and not just the cost of that service. Like, for example, when we are selecting our partners, if I go to if my rig stops for a day, we might end up losing 30, 40, 50, $60,000 a day, and so the cheapest necessarily does not work for me. So so it has to be win-win. It cannot be I win or it cannot be you win. It is both of us together win. And so therefore, we like to have a very transparent approach. And like Manish very nicely mentioned, it is moved from vendorship to partnership sort of model. And I think we like to really be open, transparent. In our company, we have very open, sort of system while dealing with vendors. And we've been trying to really rework this whole, relationship of vendors. So and likewise, what I see is that there has to be some reward when there is a penalty also. So often we see it's only penalizing, but you got to, sometimes give a pat on the back of the supplier, reward them for better than expected performance, which we like to do with our vendor partners. And to the second part of your question was, I think, regarding how do we manage inventory. And my friend Sid, he's been with Amazon. He's telling me, I think he understands best how technology plays a role in supply chain. And I can tell you at oil and gas, and Stéphane would also agree with me, especially in my kind of oil field services business, where we have inventory continuously moving from one well site to another well site, crisscrossing the country. It can be a logistical and inventory nightmare. It's not an inventory which is locked up in one location. And so therefore, we've been trying some very interesting developments, some low-hanging fruits. RFID chip costs have really come down, the stickers. So for our high inventory value items, we have experimented with RFID, and I'm sure, Sid, that's something we picked up from some of these e-commerce companies. I remember I have a friend in the business of diamonds, and I was checking with him. Look, guys, my problem is much smaller compared to yours. How do you guys do it? And that's where we came to understand of so some of these high value inventory items we like to use technology, and we find that often it is available in one site, and if we don't use technology, we end up ordering in another site. So this has saved us the day. Yes.
Great. Ashish, you brought up technology, and I'll come to you, Sid, in a minute, because very interesting topic, and wanted to get your thoughts on that. But before, Mahesh, how important it is to have an early engagement between the operators and EPC to reduce supply chain risk. We talked about partnership, and especially amongst the providers and the owners. How do you see this as one of the key levers for managing the supply chain risk that we see today?
I think it's very important. Look, it used to exist in bits and pieces before, but I think it's taken a significant role, taken on a significant role post-COVID, right? And I won't name specific projects people can make out. So we're doing a very large project in Australia, a large gas project, right? The customer there came to us with a concept and basically said, we would like to work with you. And then in the process, they also then completely booked up our fabrication facilities, marine facilities, because we know by spending a small amount of money and telling us that you will work on this project and subject to both of us taking it to, a final investment decision, this is it. So then I'm obliged to then keep all of that. And then end of the day, today I can tell you that they got it all done at about 2020 rates and with certain, risks being shared. And then the project is in its 90% completion stage, right? And we use the best of our resources in terms of whether it's in China, certain offices in India, a lot of work out of KL, in Hague, etc., to come up with a solution. The fact that they came early into the piece meant that happened. And I had a similar project, which actually was from the Gulf of Mexico, where I think the operator was forced to go in for a proper bidding system, where they got a lot of the engineering done themselves. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but then today what has happened is that project then got shelved for 2 years and they're starting to restart again. Someone's getting ready to produce and the other one is still trying to figure out what's on the drawing board. And I think from an economics perspective, not much is actually different. So I think that early engagement piece is very important for 3 or 4 different reasons. Number one, I think by engaging early, what you're doing is clearly sending a message to the supplier base, whether it all the way down the chain, that look, we are serious, we want to engage with you. And then what we did in that specific example that I'm talking about is, we didn't just keep it to ourselves. What I did was, for example, I went to the compressor vendor, I went to the pump vendor, all of this, and said, look, if when I get the job, you get the job, right? And then we kind of lined up the supply chain, and then the customer came in and put some sort of, a token amount of money in terms of engaging it. So what that meant was that we did a lot of optimization, came up with the right answers, etc., which helped the customer also cut down capex and get to FID with the right economics. So that's how it helped, not just in terms of cutting out lead time, but also in terms of improving economics and competitiveness. So I think there is a great lesson to be learned, which was a first off, but I think we have since then replicated certain aspects of that which have actually worked. Put the reverse order in it. It's easy to talk about it. A lot of our customers will say, well, that works because they can do it because they are independent and they are private. For us, we are answerable to the taxpayers. I'm talking about NOCs generally, right? How do we then make sure it is competitive, right? Again, I will take the example of Saudi Aramco, right? So what do they do in our business is that they've gone through a process of pre-selection. They have standardized their designs and they have said, this is a panel of 3 or 4 people, my terms and conditions are fixed, and this is how we do it, right? So you can get competitiveness in another way. It doesn't have to be an absolute bidding process of 1 year and 2 years and then get to the lowest dollar. So you can still get it. So I know it's not the early engagement piece, but then by doing a lot of the work upfront in terms of standardizing your vendor base, you're again taking advantage of time. So I think there are 2 different models available, one for NOCs and one for independents. each one of that works, but I think the key is engaging early and sharing risks and reward early and walking, hands tight together so that we all face the same issues as we move forward rather than one taking larger risk than the other.
Yeah, indeed. No, it's really fascinating to hear that how procurement practices got to evolve from where it was, especially for NOCs, which were like a lot more, structured and straightforward.
Compliance driven. So we understand that. So, but there's
something that
it doesn't mean that becomes your bottleneck, right?
Yeah, indeed, and there are some really good practices which are evolving for the other NOCs to look at. Coming to the digital and innovation topic, I know you've been wanting to talk about AI, automation, and data analytics are transforming procurement. This is what we've been hearing, and there are a lot of use cases, and there are a lot of impacts of those use cases which have been talked about. We talked about Aramco. Aramco implemented digital twins and have significantly benefited from that. We talk about predictive maintenance and Gen AIs, delivering significant value for drilling and cutting well costs, etc. Right? How these solutions are actually evolving to drive efficiency, reduction of cost. Do you see this as to be going forward the norm? Are there enough success stories for us to establish that digital and AI is going to be a game changer?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is two components to the answer. One is the glamorous side and one's the unglamorous side. I'll start with the unglamorous side, which is data health and the quality of data available to customers, right? Or any industrial operator for that matter. As you've grown over the years and over the decades, your value chains end up being a little bit Frankenstein-y, that are an amalgamation of different technology decisions made over the last 20, 30 years. So the biggest inhibitor in AI or any technology related solution working is the quality of data. So every time you go and end up having a conversation with a customer, they would say, well, I'll go fix my data first before we go do something. So in order to meet our customers where they are, as opposed to sit here and hope that they change their mind over time, we went and acquired a company called Datagration a few months ago over here at Weatherford, and that did two things. It added an empirical capability to an otherwise physics-driven organization, but more importantly, we bought a piece of technology that was the universal normalizer of all data, time series data collected over time. So you could basically go to a customer and say, regardless of when you built this facility and what infrastructure you've got, we can normalize all of that data into 2025 into a singular format to now do the glamorous stuff, which everyone talks about. So going to that side, there is a really interesting use case we're working on with a customer in the middle of Australia. There seems to be a theme of innovation, I suppose, in Australia as well, where the average amount of time taken for them to write, a drilling engineer to write a drill plan was 7 weeks. They've been drilling in the same basin for 60 years. And they've drilled over 6,000 wells, and well number 6001 takes exactly the same amount of time to write a drill plan for as well number 1 did. So we've materially learned nothing new. So we embarked on a use case with this customer where we built a training model for all the drill plans that existed for the first 6,000 wells to come up with a recommendation for what the 6,001st well was supposed to be like. Given that the geology is so well understood, given that the constraints are so well understood, both on the physical side and subsurface, and if that was even 50% of the way there, we could save the customer a lot of time and money as a result. Just in the first instance itself, the first document that was created by technology took less than 1 day for the drilling engineer to modify to have a new readily available drill plan. So you have an improvement of 7 weeks per engineer. This customer has 100 drilling engineer, and I'll let you do the math on multiplying it with their compensation and what the associated cost savings are. So that's just from a cost saving perspective. There is a couple of other pieces of technology used on the value generation side as well. Because I think cost cutting is relatively straightforward. It's value generation that becomes a little bit more difficult. And on that front as well, we've been working with a customer to create the first unified above surface and below surface optimization model. So as opposed to take inputs from various reservoir optimization solutions that basically break the laws of physics as far as facilities are concerned, or build a facilities optimization model and theoretically ask a well to do something that it cannot physically do, we worked with them to create the first unified optimization model. And what that allowed them to do was really interesting. To benchmark the efficacy of this, we said, if you were to just go do a workover and spend $1 today, how many dollars would you get back? And they said, in a period of 12 months, we would get $6 back. So that's the benchmark, 6 to 1. And then this digital effort with the unified optimization model that I was talking about, we monitored that over 18 months, and the efficacy of the exact same dollar was $36 made back again. And so the leverageability of the dollar spent on AI-based technologies as opposed to physics-based technologies is, in this case, 6 times. So there are some of the examples, both on the glamorous and the unglamorous side, that are particularly effective.
This is amazing. We're gradually running out of time. So, Stéphane, I wanted to still ask you a question on digital. Total is at the forefront of digital transformation. In 2020, you guys established a digital factory bringing 300 plus experts. And you also partnered with Schlumberger to co-develop next generation solutions, right? Could you spend like 30 seconds on sharing your experience and how does it impact procurement supply chain?
Yes. So actually, you speak a bit about procurement, but we have actually the same issue. You know, in big IOCs, you have a lot of data. A lot of data. We get a lot of data from suppliers, from contractors, from operations, and so on, but we don't use them very well. So that was an issue we had. Then, actually, internally, what we tend to do also in the past, it was typically the market, the tools on the market were not good enough for us. So we had the tendency to develop our own tools and just customizing the tool, developing the tools, but with no AI and nothing inside the tool. So today, what has changed and what is changing with the new technology, that we stopped developing our own tool, hence the partnership with Schlumberger and so on. So to work and to use the tools developed by specific partners, by suppliers, by contractors that are in the business and that will integrate actually the AI. And then the second aspect is, okay, let's forget about all the data we have not used in the past. Don't try just to clean it and so on. But from now, let's use the data we have. Let's take advantage. Let's capitalize on the data we get from the contractors and so on. Let's avoid typically just to re-ask them always the same kind of data, the same HSE performance. So let's capitalize on all the performance we get with the contractors. So it will save money, save cost for us and for the contractors. So that are the two aspects that we have. And for that, we have developed what we call the digital pole. So addressing surface data, subsurface data, plus all the contractors' performance data.
Excellent, excellent.
Just quickly, Chits, adding to what Stéphane said. So I agree. We generate lots of data as service providers. There are tons of log sheets, and and for a very long time, none of. And I just want to wait 30 seconds. One of our young engineers sitting right there in the audience, he, out of just his interest and curiosity, decided to upload a bunch of this data into a normal GPT model and just gave prompt, analyze this. And it was so interesting that it came up with some patterns which we had never been able to identify. And that led us to actually work out a PM, preventive maintenance model, because these GPT models could really show us the trends. And I think it's a small way, but now suddenly the whole organization, Seros, is excited towards using the capability of what is available.
Excellent. No, this is fascinating to hear all these great use cases on digital, and it just re-emphasizes the fact that how it's going to be a game changer. We're gradually running out of time really quickly. I know one thing I just wanted to talk about. Bring for discussion, but maybe just spend 30 seconds on this one, guys. we are in India, and as you see, you have a big global view in your current roles. Um, how do you view India's role in global oil and gas supply chains? Are there specific opportunities to expand collaboration with Indian EPCs, OFSCs, and OEMs, right, to boost competitiveness? Maybe 30 seconds each one of you, if you could share your view on India, it will be good before we close.
Okay, maybe
So
I'll
start
Oh,
with
from the other end? Okay, good.
Awesome. So I'll say, as opposed to opportunities, there's two capabilities that we're focused on leveraging from India and making our supply chains more efficient and successful. So the first one is technological talent. Bar none, is some of the best technological talent we've seen in the world. Whether we're talking about software development, whether we're talking about data science, data engineering, and basically the entire empirical field that's developed over the last few years. And second, and this is another critical one, is manufacturing capacity is going to be truly differentiating for India. So in a nutshell, those would be the two capabilities that would be extremely critical to have more effective supply chains going forward.
Stéphane.
I continue. Yeah, so for TotalEnergies, it's clear. India is clearly a diversification market for us today. As you heard, we have a lot of projects everywhere. We need Indian suppliers, Indian contractors in operation. Globally, what we saw today in TotalEnergies, I'm in the position for almost 2 years. I have Indian competitors in the digital solution, in the IT, not at all in the manufacturing, not at all in the contractor portfolio. So globally, that's the goal of my presence here. It was just to meet actually with the Indian supply chain, what are the capabilities. And I was a bit disappointed for the last 2 days, because most of the contractor suppliers were telling us, okay, I'm on the Indian market, but not ready to go abroad, not ready to go international, and so on. So my position was, don't be afraid. We are there. We are a big company. We can accompany also the contractor. So don't be shy. Come to us, and then we can work together, start engaging together, see the capabilities on the Indian market, and then walk the way. So,
Ashish.
I hear you loud and clear, Stéphane. Thank you. And I want to tell everyone, there's probably no better example than Seros to summarize this, Yes, there is tremendous opportunity in the Indian market for a lot of these services, because they're all high technology and equipment, all forte of West. But you see, Seros, we started 2.5 years ago into very niche area of services, all of, fracking and nitrogen pumping and, high rate pumping, etc. We have seized the opportunity, quickly come up, learned, collaborated with all majors like Schlumberger and Baker, Halliburton, everyone, providing same level of services. And the big advantage is there is tremendous pool of Indian talent in all of the big global companies. And given a chance, given the opportunity back home, a lot of them are actually sort of willing to come back. And so I think it's a huge opportunity, and building right at home and then expanding overseas is the way to go. And I think there's a clear advantage which the Indian companies bring.
Manish, you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think my co-panelists have already talked about it. Let me share a personal experience. We acquired a floating production system from a Norwegian company, and which we had to customize to operate in the Indian environment. And guess what? We went to Dubai dry docks, and surprisingly, everyone working on this customization was somehow connected to India. So that's the beauty. Means we have a rich talent of experienced people serving in the oil and gas space. And as Ashish mentioned, several of them are willing to come back to India. I think what we need is, and what Steve did mention, I think we just need to do it. We need to make in India and serve the world. I think that's the model which we should be really looking at. And there's a long opportunity, for us to do it and do it cost competitively and timely.
Yeah, I mean, from when I look at the EPC sector, right? I mean, going back, so we probably have about 4,500 engineers in a company, right? And if you go back, probably 3,000 plus are Indians. So effectively, from the knowledge perspective, over the last few years, this industry has actually then had massive amount of Indian talent across the world doing it. The second thing, when we started executing projects in India, right, multi-billion dollar projects, what we then figured out is the capability to manage supply chain. I mean, you call it package management, supply chain management, project management, is a capability that exists, which is not about the theoretical project management, their ability to understand the environment, to be able to balance out interface management. That talent is there, which we are interestingly starting to then, what we then developed here, now we are using across the world in terms of the talent. So that's the talent piece. And then on top of it, we already heard from Sid about what they can do from a digital perspective. Coming back to manufacturing, so we've had a couple of partnerships through which we have tried to do some technologically, challenging stuff for Indian projects, which is the whole concept of Make in India, etc. I think the key, and Stéphane, I think you kind of touched upon it, is you do not see a lot of people who are in the manufacturing stage in an ready to export. And our view on it, having spent a lot of time here, is the system, the manufacturing system, in terms of whether it's vendors or the manufacturing facilities, are set up and geared towards delivering to the NOCs in India generally. I think so. They are more focused on compliance, cost competitiveness, etc. And I think by people like yourself, coming in and then holding hands, if you then create that first opportunity for people to think beyond that, and I think that's what's going to change the supply chain. So I think the manufacturing capability exists. If you can deliver for a world-class project in India, you can deliver for a world-class project elsewhere. That's what it is all about, right? But then the manufacturing system is set up more to comply with the existing NOC, world here, which is probably 40, 50 years, nothing has changed. So people have developed around it. So to be able to hold their hands and take them outside that zone of comfort or discomfort, however you want to look at it, right, is the key there. So that's my view.
Great. I've still have many more questions to ask, but we've finished our stipulated time. So I want to conclude here. I wanted to thank each one of you panel members for very, very insightful thoughts and sharing that. As we conclude, I just wanted my three key takeaways from here is that for procurement supply chain mind shift is happening. We are looking at more strategic partnerships and driving value than looking at cost. Digital and data and analytics is continuing to drive value for a procurement and supply chain and bring the resilience and competitiveness to the forefront and continue to do so. New cases are use cases are emerging, which is great to see. And last but not least, India holds a lot of promise for each one of us. So, looking forward to that. So with that, I just want to conclude this panel. I want to thank the organizers for organizing this, and thank you all for being patiently listening to us. And have a great evening. Thank you all.